most of my ministerial career, I spoke no more than every other week because I had this dynamic partner that always, in her shadow. I always feel good when we watch her and I'm sitting there and know that I was part of that. But what happens is now I'm speaking pretty much every week with a few times off, but mostly every week. And there's going to be times when I repeat myself. And I want you to know, for the most part, that's intentional. And I want to encourage you not to say to yourself, oh, you already said that. I would rather you ask yourself, am I practicing that? Because some of these things you have to say over and over. I have to say it for me. And if you've ever heard the true feelings of ministers in this movement, whatever it is we're speaking about, it's for us. It's consequential, obviously, that it has value to others in the room, but ministers are always talking to themselves. So, the thing that has come to me to share with you this morning, again, comes from the idea of how we deal with challenges in our lives. When we're standing on the mountaintop and everything in our lives is working beautifully, we're really good with the science of mind. But when something goes awry, something goes unexpectedly in a certain direction, somebody does something. Like, it is so many scenarios. What do we do? Well, instinctively, I think as human beings, we do this thing which is known as the fight or flight syndrome. We either dig in and hold our position, or we run away. In my life, I've probably done more running away. But neither of those two approaches actually get you where you want to be. And that's what I want to talk about this morning, specifically the idea of trying to hold your ground to kind of take on the battle of whatever's going on. It seems logical, it seems appropriate. Why? But if it's the idea that the only other option is to run away, is not so. And obviously where I'm going with this is that if you're facing a challenge, what I have found works in my life the very best is to take a step. To take a step to change my perspective. Because, as you know, if you're looking at any object, it's going to look different if you take a step and maybe another step, and you're looking at it from a different angle. There's that old story about a group of blind people all touching an elephant and all having completely different explanations as to what it is they're touching. And why would that be? Because one of them's touching their trunk and the other's touching their tail or their tusk or their leg. And they come up with all these different descriptions, but what's before them is the same thing, an elephant. So maybe we do the same kind of thing with the things that we call the challenges in our lives. Maybe it's really a matter more of perspective than it is anything else. So what I want to talk about is, how do you take this step? And what kind of step is it? Well, you could step forward, step back, step up, step down, step to the side. There's lots of ways to take a step. And all of them may have value in giving you a different perspective. So it's not so much that I'm talking about taking physical steps today. It's more about actually taking steps to change your perspective. And that's where we're going to go today. That's what we're going to talk about. So as I always do, I've come up with a list for you. I've come up with 8, let me see what I called them. 8 steps for taking 8 get that out of the shadow. 8 ways of taking a step and getting a different perspective. So again, 8 of them. Here we go. Number 1. Shift your perspective from outside to inside. That is the place to start. Because every time there's a problem in our lives, a challenge in our lives, we look at it, we point at it, We think about it over there. But the truth of it all is that the origins of that are happening not inside your body, but inside your psyche. They're happening because you have some belief, some thought, something hidden in your consciousness that has impacted spiritual law and presented this scenario in your life. All the time. This is how it works. And we keep looking at the problem, at the thing, and thinking that somehow that's going to change. It's not. It's not where it's happening. It's happening here. It's happening not here in body again, but in consciousness. And the way to change it is to change the perspective that you're holding in consciousness about it. I actually had, I think maybe the thing that brought all this on this week was that I have a long-standing agreement with Barbara never to do plumbing. We were living in a rental home in Florida, and I don't remember what the deal was, but this was a nice house. It was a sturdy house. It had copper pipes in the house, and somewhere, I think it was in the laundry room, I was fixing it. And sure enough, wrenched that thing right off the wall, water spraying everywhere. It was nasty. It was a mess. So I managed to go find the cutoff valve and call a plumber. So to this day, that has been the agreement with Barbara and I, that we have some professional or somebody that at least knows what they're doing take care of this kind of stuff for us. So you may recall that last week I spoke about the challenge I was having with a toilet in the building here, and that I had brought in a freelance plumber, and that after 3 weeks of trying to get this done, it had not gotten done. And then so when we were walking out, one of the first people through was one of our members, Ron Smart, who is good at all kinds of handyman stuff. And he said, I'll take a look at it. And he came on Tuesday. And what this guy had worked on a number of times, Ron fixed in probably under 45 minutes. And helped me take out the replacement toilet that I no longer needed back out to my truck and take it back to the store where I bought it. So that was lovely. But also who came through the line was someone else who said, I'm a plumber. If you need help, great. And I said, I really don't need that because I've got that handled, but I have a personal thing going on that I would love some help with. I would really like to have a new kitchen sink in my house. And he said, great, I'll come help you with it. And he did just exactly what he said he would do. And in the meantime, we have a reverse osmosis system under the sink, and I ordered new filters for it. I figured he'll put those in too. Well, they didn't show up on time. So he came and put in the sink, and the sink is beautiful. I'm very happy with it. But he turned off the reverse osmosis, and I'm really a stickler with, especially with Barbara, not to drink tap water, to drink only highly filtered water, or to give her only that. So then I went through the thing, and I went to the store twice buying jugs of water, and after I'd done that, I went down to the basement and was getting some coffee in our little storage area downstairs and saw the 6-pack of 6 gallons of water sitting down there. But I figure we'll use that eventually too. So the guy couldn't come. He called me. He said, I'll come Saturday morning. And so yesterday morning, an hour before he was to be there, he called. He said, I've been exposed to COVID. Okay, so what do? I called the guy that changed the filters last time for me. He knows what he's doing. So he came over, and I watched him, and he changed all the filters. And one thing about a reverse osmosis system is that it makes a sound, like a gurgling sound, because it has water rinsing over the filter as it's happening. And that goes on until the tank's full, and then it turns off. Well, he left, and I left and came over here and came back at the end of the day and went upstairs, and it's still gurgling. And so I opened the cabinets underneath, and it's sopping wet. So I called him and said, it's all wet under my cabinet. He says, you need to get a plumber. So I have to turn off the cold water, so now I've only got hot water in the kitchen. I know better than to call a plumber on the weekend. So I'm planning to call tomorrow. And I'll tell you what, I sat with this and I kept looking at it differently and said, what is it about this in me that has me struggling? What is it about my belief about me being able to do this stuff that makes me incapacitated and just stuck in this space? What is it that I'm holding on to that keeps this being a problem? And when I took that perspective and realized that this was about me, it wasn't about the pipes or the filters. This was about me and feeling incompetent and feeling like I can't do this. It occurred to me, this is easy. This is about getting new seals, taking it apart just the way I watched him do it, putting in new seals and tightening back up, and the thing's going to work. So that's where I am right now. I haven't done it yet. That's my Sunday afternoon project. But I've let go of the idea that I'm going to break it because that doesn't serve me anymore. What serves me is to have good quality filtered water and to know that I can do it. So I invite you to know that with me. Yeah. Okay, so shift the perspective from the thing you're looking at to what's going on with you to get the response that you want. That's the first one. The second one is stop shooting all over yourself. And what this means, oh, I should have gone and gotten the blah, blah, or I should have remembered that this was going to happen, and I shouldn't have asked this person to get involved, or any other kinds of shoulds that I can come up with. They're wasting your time. You're not helping anything because they're all after the fact. You think that you did stuff to make the problem. Well, you did. But that's not the important thing. It's not important at all. Because if you created this challenge in your life, you can create something else. But you have to let go of the idea that the problem is in the past. The thing to be corrected is in the past because you can't correct the past. You can only correct the present. So having any kind of judgment about what has happened and thinking it should have happened a different way does not help. Remember, God's in the midst of it all, even the things that we call our problems. And it's important to remember that in the midst of this so that we don't should all over ourselves. Okay? Number 3, forgive yourself and everybody else. So back to my plumbing story, I certainly can't blame the plumber that came for getting COVID. What's to blame? That's just things that happen. Or he doesn't, we don't even know if he has COVID. But or blaming the other guy that came when they leaked. Why would I blame him? He came and I watched him. What else was he to do? He did exactly what he said he was going to do. What I'm sure it takes to get this to work. It just has a leak. Okay, so we fix that. But blaming anybody doesn't help. And we tend to. Don't we tend to do that? Don't we tend to want to have somebody to blame? I'm notorious for that. When I'm missing something, my first thought is somebody took it. Nobody took it. I put it somewhere, and I just haven't remembered where I put it. It's virtually always the case. So what's to blame? Who's to go after on this? So forgive. Let it go. Even yourself. Doesn't matter what you thought yesterday or this morning. It matters what you're thinking now. Right now is the only place you can change the outcome in your life. So the past can be informative, but when we use it as a problem, it gets in our way. And the way to relieve ourselves from the past is to forgive. It was Maya Angelou that originally, so I'm told, originally said that blaming someone for your situation is like taking poison, expecting them to die. It doesn't work. So there's nobody to blame, only to forgive, because we have blamed. Likely we've found somebody to blame in the moment, even if it's a precarious, unknown figure. We found that there's somebody out there to blame. And the only way to stop that is to forgive. Forgive the ones you know, the ones you're just making up. Just forgive and move forward. Kind of gives you that clean slate. It lightens things up so that you can move through whatever's going on in a better way. That's 3. Number 4 is ask yourself, how could this situation work for me? because some conditions that show up in our lives may stick around for a while. So how do you make that work for you? Truly, most conditions are transitory. They're going to shift and change. But if something looks like it's going to be around for a while, how can I make this work? Boy, I got stuck on a comedian recently who had cerebral palsy. So he had some bodily dysfunction. And he used that so brilliantly. It was genius the way he used that in his comedy skit. Because we grew up thinking we should feel badly for people who have those kind of maladies. But he's made a career out of it and made it really work for him. He had me in stitches. And mostly it's about his condition. You know? And I tell you, if that man could do it, how can we say that we have terrible things in our lives that are working against us? Perhaps if we would just take a step and look differently at what's going on, we might find some value in it, some silver lining, something about it that we can use to our advantage. But you got to look for it. You got to be willing to make the move and take the step and look at it in a different way, in a way that can support your life. And maybe support people around you. You never know. See, these things we call problems, they're all God, just like everything else. And that doesn't mean we necessarily have to have them happen and like them. But at some point, if they're going to stick around, we might as well make peace with them and see what we can do. Find something in the condition for which you can be grateful. That's taking it just a step further and saying, I'm grateful for this thing in my life. I was angry about it. I was miserable about it. I was letting it control my life because it's all I thought about, how wrong and terrible it was. But you know what? It's a gift, and I'm going to be grateful for it. So what happens when you're grateful for something that you really didn't want is that it lightens up your affect in a way that perhaps you can do something about it. But you can't do anything about it when you're dug in, when your energy is heavy and defiant. It just makes it grow because all you're thinking about is the problem. So give it a different perspective and see if you don't get a different result through gratitude. Here's a thought on gratitude. Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. So this horrible thing that we really don't want is really on the verge of being something wonderful. I had a teacher once that suggested that I and all the other people in the class think about the real hard spots in our lives where we got divorced, or somebody important died, or we got in trouble with the law, or anything like that, where just deep, troublesome moments in our lives. She said, remember when that happened. You know, on a timeline, remember when it happened. When it happened. Did it happen in 1984? Okay. What happened in 1985? And every one of us could find something really important that happened within a short time span after that very difficult time that was a marker in our lives for how good our lives were. The Spanish flu that happened around the world in the early 1918, 1919, I think is when it happened, was a horrible time in America and the world. People were just dying. So many more people were dying than have died of AIDS. Of COVID. But what happened when that was over? The roaring 20s. You know, party time. So I'm holding the idea that even with COVID, we may be moving into something delightful here before too long. Maybe it won't happen this time. I don't know. But that's a possibility. So look for the benefit. Number 6, if others are involved, play a win-win game. We tend to hunker down and hold on our position and somehow want the other person to lose because we want to win. We want our position to be the right one. We want to be able to keep that and work that and to heck with them. And what I'm telling you is that when we do that, we're setting ourselves up to lose. because we're wanting them to lose. And what we can do in a different way is to say, I want you to win. And I want to win. And I'm willing to work with you to see that we both and all win. So what happens with that? Well, if win is the only game you're willing to play, then you will win. Now, that doesn't mean that the other person has to lose. They can win too. Or they can lose, because that's their choice. But if you play the win-win, it will change your perspective and give you a different way to react and relate to what's going on in a way that is powerful and helpful. Number 7 is hold your head up and smile. I'm not kidding. What happens when you do that is it changes your affect. It changes your emotional state just by looking up and smiling. This feels good. And it may seem weird that that's actually useful, but it truly is. Because if you're dealing with something that's hard, your tendency is to tighten up and look down, and certainly have those concerned wrinkles on your face. Whereas if you let that go and just look up and smile, it changes. It changes. It gives you a different perspective. Just that easy. And we'll close with this one. Learn something important from what you're going through. Mine is a standard. I have one answer to that, or one thing that I do. I do it all the time. If I'm faced with some kind of struggle, my thought is, this is here to tell me that I am bigger and more powerful than it. And if I can change my perspective to know that that is so and believe it, then I can get the outcome that I desire. But if I think it's bigger than me, I've lost already. So there may be many other ways to do that, to learn something from it. Everything has lessons in it. Everything has new ways of seeing it. And again, you may not see it from that dug-in place, but if you take a step or two and you look at it again, you may well just get an entirely different experience. Because God really is all there is. And it's important to know that and remember that wherever we are. Anyone in the room read Latin? This was a phrase that was above the entry door into Carl Jung's home, the great psychoanalyst. What it means is that bidden or not bidden, God is present. And that's over our door coming into this sanctuary. Bidden or not bidden, God is present. How can you lose when God is all there is? Where is there room for loss? Where is there room for trouble? There's only room for love. So notice that when you come in this room. Maybe you can turn around when you're leaving the room and look at it and remember that that's true. That's a great truth for all of us. It was the Oracle of Delphi that actually originally came up with that concept in ancient Greece. And one more thought from our teacher, Ernest. Every step of the way, God is always there. And when we know that and when we live from that, life works. It works for me. It works for you. And with that, thank you for your kind attention. What a wonderful day. Thank you.